Well, welcome to our presentation. We would like to first of all say that our presentation is about some experiences that we did in the last 3 years. So it was well and truly occurring before the pandemic. And we have some data as well around, that shift. But similar to Dr. Jarvis, our context is actually quite similar, and we've found some very similar results to his a presentation with regards to some of the challenges that we've faced and some of the successes that we've achieved. Craig, are you there? No, he's not. All right, well, let me just tell you about our context. So we work for Central Queensland University, both Craig and myself, and there was a team of 5 of us that did this project. And Craig is going to be communicating it, but when he comes in, if his system will hold up. Australia is a really big country, as you guys would know, and you can see on the image there that we are quite large. At our university, we actually have 26 different sites that we deliver from. So we are all online. So most of our course material is already online. But we do have face-to-face offerings similar to what Dr. Jarvis was talking about. So all of our students have 2 study options. So they can choose the face-to-face option if they live next to a campus, or they can do online distance learning, or they can do a blended mode. So either way, they access all their information on a Moodle site, but they can attend the class or they can attend a distance live streaming. So what was our problem? Our problem was we wanted to offer, or we were offering face-to-face on both the Noosa and the Cairns campuses, and they're 1,500 kilometres away. Now, I must say before we go any further that we are teaching teachers. So the courses that we were running were to teach teachers pedagogical approaches for how they could be excellent in their pedagogy. So that was our very core business. So you can imagine when you're trying to do that online, it's not necessarily about the information you're presenting, it's about the way you're presenting it. So what we had though is in our 2 contexts, so the Cairns and the Noosa sites, is that we had really low camp sizes on our campuses, but we had a lot of expertise in Noosa, and because Cairns was a new campus, we didn't have a lot of trained expertise. So we wanted to kind of have those 2 strengths come together to make an equitable, optimal, face-to-face experience over 2 different campuses. And in fact, we've actually added a 3rd campus in there since this project was started. So like I said, though, our key focus was around pedagogy. We used a platform called ISL, which is synchronous, blended collaborative space, so we could hear and see each other. And you can see in the image there in the middle that in operation. Craig is on the Cairns, the Noosa campus in that video, and that's my class sitting up here on the Cairns campus. So what were the benefits that we found? We used the ISL system, and why this is so significant for our university is we had seen it happening in other courses, so in maths and IT, but it was all very didactically used. And we didn't want that. We wanted to use the benefits of ISL so that we could actually have discussions with our students across, that distance of 1,500. We wanted them to be able to have discussions with each other. We wanted everybody to be able to feel that they belonged to that space, which is why we called it a 3rd space, because it wasn't online and it wasn't face-to-face. It was a new space that we were trying to create. We were having to, though, in that space, adapt the way that we normally did teaching. Because as you can imagine, when you're in a classroom with 20 students and you've got group work going, we wanted to transition that across to the new space. So how did we do that? We had lots of technology to worry about. We had microphones, we had screens, we had all of this noise happening at times. And how did we go about that? So first of all, we focused on 3 things. We wanted to make sure, I've actually got a video of it here, if I can play. Craig, have you joined us yet?
It took me 12 minutes and in that 12 minutes I took 2 phone calls. So I don't anticipate this is going to be...
Can you guys hear that? Have I shared with sound?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, so this is Craig in action. I'll just show it to you again.
It took me 12 minutes, and in that 12 minutes I took 2 phone calls. So I don't anticipate this is going to be a taxing or difficult issue. The other thing I wanted to comfort you with, my recollection is that I had seen every one of the questions before.
So what you can see in this space is the Cairns campus, the Cairns campus up on the screen. And what they're actually doing is they're doing a midterm exam. So he's just handing out the exam, and you can see it's very blurry, but me handing out the exam at the same time up on the Cairns campus. And then I leave the room and he then responds to students as they need assistance, but that is the level of interaction. You can, students are able to ask questions and make comments all the way through. All right, so as we are good researchers, we didn't just go ahead and do this project. We did pack some research around it. We used literature that informed about, this synchronized space. And what we did was eventually, we really focused on NASA and Cook's 3 resource framework. So that became our focus. We had cycles over, like I said, a couple of years, and we have run this in 2020. We used a participatory action research. So the students were very involved in this process all the way through. You can read the research question there in blue. We started in term 1, 2018. We have 12-week terms. So we started with surveys and Zoom recorded focus groups to see what we did and didn't do well. And then we went through those cycles 4 times. Now, what's important about the NASA and Cook resource framework is that we focused on 3 aspects of the experience. So the first was the materials and activities, the teaching, the actual things that we did in the space. But then what was unique about our research, and I think it's quite unique to the social sciences, is that we really focused on the relationships and how technology could facilitate the relationships in the classroom. But also, and what we came to understand was professional identity. And Dr. Hillary, you asked before, what was the most important aspect of Dr. Jervis's presentation? For us, that professional identity actually emerged as the most important aspect of our research. So we'll talk about that in the middle, as we go through. So Craig, are you there? And are you able to join in? No, he's not. All right. So we've got 3 different perceptions that we're going to talk about. Like I said, there was 5 of us teaching into this space, but the 3 of us kind of, summarize what we did. Craig was really excited, and he was actually the technology guy. So he was the one that worked with seating and the space with the muting and how to set up the room properly. He asked questions around how do I, where do I stand that they can see me? He kept disappearing off the screen. He used lots of simple tricks like having paddle pop sticks like we do in a primary school classroom to get students to respond. So rather, we learned very quickly, you couldn't just ask a question. You had to have be directing it at somebody all the time. So otherwise students didn't understand who you were talking to. So just really simple pedagogical approaches like that. He really focused on making it an interpersonal experiences for the students and how to get them engaging with each other. Right, so that was his experience. He taught into the group 3 in term 1 of each year. Jacqui was very different. So Jacqui really struggled in this space. And I thought it was interesting, the first presenter in this group talked about having a more of a maths situation and then more of the methodology situation. And that we found that some subjects some teachers really struggled to deliver their subject area online or in this space. And Jacqui was one of those people. She found it very difficult to replicate the trust that she had in a face-to-face group. She found it really challenging to rethink resources and how to do the activities. And what ended up happening with that was her self-efficacy as a lecturer really took a hit, and she really actually chose not to engage in the process in the following year. So she was only involved in 2018. For me, I loved the process. Now, I was the only person in Cairns, and for me, I was the one without the expertise. So as my students, I was trying to actually advocate for by, trying these new things. So for me, I kind of tackled it as a challenge, and I was the only person who taught consistently over all 4 terms. And I think that made a massive difference because I could literally build from year to year, term to term with the students and focus on and really create those relationships. I focused very much then on using Google Docs to actually do cross-campus grouping. So we do a lot of, group work as part of our lectures or our tutorials. We were doing them across campuses. So I wouldn't just say, all right, the new secure campus, you're one group, Cairns campus, you're another group. We would actually make smaller groups across campuses. And that's what I really focused on. I focused on getting feedback, giving the students feedback continuously about their identity as teachers, about their behavior in the space. So we actually used to stop sometimes our lecture and talk about, okay, what's working in this space right now? What is not working? How do we need to adjust as pre-service teachers and teachers to make this space work differently? So it really was about catering for the diversity of the students that were, and me, and in that space. And one of the other really key strategies that I used was humor. I tried to make light of a lot of situations and really create a culture in the classroom of risk-taking. And if we made a mistake, that was okay. It was okay to fail and try new things. And if things didn't work, it was up to them to tell me and give me feedback. It was a co-designed space, not just me being the lecturer at the front, because I was training teachers and they need to be responsible. All right, Craig, are you here? Not yet. Okay. So what do the teachers or what do our students say about this? I'll let you read that for a second. We can see a big shift in the process. So definitely in the first term, we tackled all the problems. We tackled that it was awkward, didn't feel comfortable in the space. It was a really difficult space to be in because we didn't know how to act. Some felt a real loss in that they had signed up to be on a campus with a lecturer in front of them. And it was about, they felt that they'd lost what they'd signed up for, but they chose to be there because it was better than going into a distance group with hundreds of other students. At least in this space, they were one of 20, not one of 100. They found it hard to ask questions, but they did like the fact that they got to share their ideas with others, that it wasn't just that small group of 5, it became a group of 10 or 20, and they liked that. When we moved into term 2, we actually noticed a significant difference in the antisocial. It's like, oh, I actually feel comfortable in this space. I actually like this space. I actually think that I could use this and how I could, they enjoyed working with us to make it innovative. And they also liked and appreciated the fact that my Cairns students just didn't have me lecturing them for 4 subjects. They actually got to access a range of lectures. By the time we got to our second year, in term 1 of 2019, we actually had some who preferred it and actually who liked it better than just being with their face-to-face group. Funnily enough, some of the blokes really loved it because we have a small number of male teachers training with a group of female teachers. We had a couple of males on each campus who used to love connecting with each other, and I found that really hilarious. They just loved that opportunity to not be the only bloke in the room. Sorry, bloke in Australia is a male. Sorry, I shouldn't use colloquialism, should I? And lastly, in term 2, this is when we were still taking quite rigid data, we actually had them asking for the ISL teaching space, the 3rd space, which was absolutely brilliant. And we felt that was a really big success. So what did we learn? We learned that it's actually less about technology and it's more about establishing relationships that underpin robust, purposeful teaching and learning pedagogies that draw on a combination of digital and face-to-face processes. Like I said before, on the left-hand side, you can see materials and activities, camera, sound, room setups. That was the easy stuff. That actually was solved within term 1. What was most difficult was the professional identity. It took us a couple of goes around to get the relationships right, but ongoing, it's been about what do we need to help staff engage and be risk takers, and how do we get them out of that discomfort, and how do we teach them and train them and mentor them so that they feel comfortable in that space. So what we actually, and what we ended up calling this space that we found was most successful, was we called it the sweet spot. So having that balance of materials and activities that worked, being able to form relationships across campuses and with teachers and with students, but also the professional identity. And I should mention too, the professional identity wasn't just about us as staff. It was actually also about the students and guiding them on how to take responsibility for themselves as students, but also seeing themselves as teachers who would be in this space in the future. And I must say, that's what happened with COVID. All of a sudden, all this work we'd done became a reality for our students. Our students were hearing about real life teachers where schools were shut down and having to teach online, and they felt enormously comfortable in that space. So they actually felt ahead of the game, which was really cool. So what else did we see during COVID? We found that students had their own network. So when we weren't able to run ISL and we had to go fully back to a Zoom space, we actually found that our students were the most resilient. They had been through this process. They understood the process and they were comfortable in that space. And they actually led and guided others who were new to the Zoom platform and taught them how to be in the space. In fact, my CAN students used to say, Miriam, how come we're the only ones who turn our cameras on? How come we're the only ones trying to make an effort to talk to each other? And I'm like, well, that's because we did a really good job on you guys. So, they've been able to share that and teach that with others. So finally, I'm just going to leave this on the screen while I offer that. That's actually the end of my process. This is from Craig's, his story as a lecturer this term. If you just want to read it at your own leisure, but yeah, that's the end of the presentation. And I think we've got some time for questions. Thanks for listening to our story.
Yes, thank you for your interesting presentation. There is a question from the chat room. Kim asked you, how do your department support your learners' initial fears or uncomfortable in teaching and learning online?
Oh, I'm so sorry. You're going to have to repeat that. I couldn't hear what you were saying.
Okay.
That's better.
How do your department support your learners' initial fears or uncomfortable in teaching and learning online?
Yeah, so we were very explicit about our own fears, and we were really explicit about being in the online space. So we would start the day each time, and I guess this came from our experience as teachers. So one of the really big pushes in Australian classrooms is that everybody feels like they belong. So when I teach grade 4 in an education setting, it's my job to make everybody feel comfortable in that space. So we tried to replicate that with our students to say, all right, who's afraid of being here? Who is feeling uncomfortable? How's your day been? We got to know them as almost as individuals. And I'm talking, that was quite difficult with a class of 25, but we took the time to be in that space and to address issues. Like I remember one time sitting there and there was 3 groups at the back of the campus down in the Noosa, and they were on their phones and they were sitting there. And I had to make the decision, do I say something or do I not? And eventually I just went, hey, can we talk about how we're engaging in this space? And so we had to try and do that non-confrontationally, but communicate to everybody else that it's not okay just to check out and be on your phone, because I wouldn't allow that in my normal lecture. So I'm not going to allow that in my ISL lecture either. Does that answer the question?
Hope that you have answered the Kim's question. There is also another question on why is ISL considered the third space that has sent a direct message to me? Why is ISL considered as third space?
A third space, okay, because in our university we had face-to-face where you are seated around a lecture theatre with the teacher. So that was the first space. It's very normal. In fact, most of our students are online, and in an online platform, what they have is their Moodle site with all their reading, and then they have a 1 hour lecture that they have the option to go to. So that's, they might go to that live lecture, or they might access that lecture as a recording. So we tried to create a space. We had to recognize that it was online because we were using a digital platform, but it wasn't, we wanted to separate it from this online impersonal space where you were one of 100 and nobody knew your name. But we also had to recognize that it wasn't this really intimate, I'm here with my students in person. So we called it the third space because we wanted to really differentiate between those two spaces so that we could start and bring the best out of that space as a different space. Does that make sense? That's why we called it a third space.
Oh, I see. Besides, there are some questions in the chat function. Perhaps it's possible for you to leave your contact email such that they can reach you directly.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Because I'm afraid that it's time is up and we have to take a break before our next session.
Absolutely.
Yeah.